My fiancé looked straight at me and said, "My past is off limits. You're not allowed to ask questions." He didn't say it hesitantly. There was no nervous laugh, no softness, no apology. His voice was flat and decisive, like he was laying down a rule that should have existed all along. For a moment, I thought I'd misunderstood him. We were sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by old photos spread out for the wedding slideshow his mom wanted to make. He had been relaxed, even playful, laughing at his college haircuts, pointing out friends, telling stories I'd already heard, but loved listening to again. This was normal. This was us. Then I saw the photo. A woman beside him, his arm around her shoulders, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that felt intimate without trying to be. They were smiling, wide and unguarded. I pointed at it without thinking, who's that? The change in him was instant. His shoulders stiffened. His fingers tightened around the edge of the album. That's nobody. I frowned slightly. Okay, but an ex? A friend? He slammed the album shut. The sound cracked through the room, sharp enough to make my chest tighten. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise itself. I don't want to talk about my past relationships, he said. Then, as if he'd been waiting for the opening, he added, "Actually, I've been meaning to bring this up. My past is off limits. You're not allowed to ask questions about it." I just stared at him. This was the man I'd been with for 3 years. The man I'd said yes to 8 months ago. We'd talked about everything. Family wounds, failed relationships, mistakes we weren't proud of. There had never been locked doors between us. No forbidden rooms. Until now. "Since when?" I asked quietly. "Since now," he replied. "I'm setting a boundary. You need to respect it." Something cold settled in my stomach. We were planning a marriage, a life built on shared history and shared truth. And suddenly there was a vault I wasn't allowed to look inside. I didn't argue. I didn't push. I just nodded once and said, "Understood." The relief on his face was immediate. He thought the conversation was over. He didn't realize that boundaries don't only go one way, and that by locking me out of his past, he'd just agreed to be locked out of my present, too. I met him 3 years ago, in a season of my life that felt steady, almost deceptively calm. I wasn't searching for fireworks or drama. I wanted consistency. Someone who showed up, someone who asked questions and stayed long enough to hear the answers. He did both. Our first conversation stretched late into the night, the kind where time slips quietly out the door. We talked about work first, safe, surface-level things, then family. He told me about his parents, the expectations, the pressure to be successful in ways that looked good from the outside. I told him about my own family, the ways love could exist alongside disappointment, how closeness sometimes came with conditions. There was no sense of performance between us, no careful curation. That honesty became the foundation of everything. As we grew closer, we talked about our pasts openly. Not obsessively, not in a way that felt invasive, just honestly. He knew about my serious ex, the relationship that lasted too long because I didn't know how to leave yet. He knew about the shorter ones, the lessons, the mistakes. I knew about his. College relationships, a messy situation after graduation. Nothing was off limits. Nothing was hidden behind dramatic pauses or clipped answers. That openness made me trust him. When we moved in together, it felt natural, not rushed. We learned each other's rhythms, the way he liked quiet mornings, the way I needed music on while cooking. We argued sometimes, of course, but we argued cleanly. No name-calling, no stonewalling. We talked things through until they softened. That's why when he proposed 8 months ago, I didn't hesitate. He planned it simply. No crowd, no spectacle, just us, sitting across from each other, his hands shaking slightly as he pulled the ring out. He told me he wanted a marriage built on honesty, on choosing each other every day. I remember how steady my voice sounded when I said yes, how sure I felt placing my life beside his. We started planning right away, a spring wedding, small but meaningful. His family was involved early, especially his mother, who had opinions about everything, from venues to flowers to the guest list. I handled it with patience. I wanted to start this marriage without resentment, without battles that didn't matter in the long run. In my mind, we were a team. That's why the shift 6 weeks ago felt so wrong. There had been no buildup, no slow erosion of trust. One moment we were laughing on the floor, sorting through memories. The next, I was being told there were questions I was no longer allowed to ask. Looking back, that's what unsettles me the most. It wasn't just the boundary, it was how sudden it was, how absolute, how confidently he rewrote the rules of our relationship without a discussion, without negotiation, without any concern for what that might do to me. 3 years of shared vulnerability didn't disappear in that moment, but it cracked. And once a crack forms, it doesn't stay small for long. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. People are allowed to have boundaries. I'd said that myself, to friends, to coworkers, to anyone who confused privacy with secrecy. I repeated it in my head like a calming mantra while I washed dishes, while I folded laundry, while I lay awake beside him at night, listening to his breathing even out. But something felt off in a way I couldn't explain. This wasn't a boundary that protected healing. It wasn't framed as pain or fear or even shame. It was control, clean, sharp, non-negotiable. A line drawn without context, without vulnerability. And the more I sat with it, the more it gnawed at me. We were getting married. Marriage isn't just about the future. It's about carrying each other's histories without weaponizing them. And now I was being asked to commit my entire life to someone who just told me there were parts of himself I wasn't allowed to know. I tried to approach it gently. One evening, while we were cooking dinner, I said, "Help me understand something. Is this about timing? Because if there's something you're not ready to talk about yet, I can give you space." He didn't even look up from the cutting board. "It's not about time. It's about boundaries." "Okay," I said carefully, my fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. "But boundaries usually come with reasons." He finally looked at me then, irritation flickering across his face. "My past doesn't affect us. You need to accept that, or we have a problem." There it was, the ultimatum. Accept total silence, or admit we had a problem. I stood there, the sound of the stove humming between us, realizing that the conversation wasn't going to move forward no matter how softly I spoke. He'd already decided. The wall was built. The door was locked. So I did the one thing I hadn't expected to do. I agreed. "Understood," I said again, meeting his eyes this time. The relief that washed over him was immediate, almost visible. His shoulders relaxed. His mouth softened into a small smile, like he'd just resolved a conflict instead of creating one. What he didn't notice was the way something inside me shifted too. Because boundaries, when they're real, don't only apply in one direction. Over the next few days, I started small, not out of spite, not to punish him. I just adjusted. When he asked what I was doing over the weekend, I said, "Just stuff." When he asked about a long work call, I said, "Work things." When he asked what my mom had said on the phone, I replied, "Family stuff." All true, all vague. At first, he didn't notice. Then he noticed. Then he frowned. "Why are you being so vague lately?" he asked one night, leaning against the doorway of the bedroom. "I'm not being vague," I said calmly. "I'm just keeping things to myself." "That's different," he said immediately. I looked up at him. "How?" He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "You know what I mean." I did know what he meant. He meant that privacy was acceptable when it belonged to him, but unsettling when it belonged to me. And once I saw that clearly, I couldn't unsee it. This wasn't about the past anymore. It was about power. The shift from irritation to panic didn't happen all at once. It came in waves, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. For a few days after I started matching his energy, he treated it like a phase. He joked about it, brushed it off, assumed I'd get tired of being mysterious. But when the vagueness didn't stop, when it became consistent, calm, immovable, his tone changed. "What did your sister want when she called?" he asked one evening, watching me from across the couch. "Just sister stuff," I said, eyes still on my phone. He waited. When I didn't elaborate, his jaw tightened. "You've been saying that a lot lately." I glanced up. "Saying what?" "Stuff. Things. Whatever." His voice sharpened. "It's like you're shutting me out." I took a slow breath, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not shutting you out. I'm respecting boundaries." His head snapped up. "That's not the same thing." "You keep saying that," I replied. "I'm genuinely curious what you think makes it different." He stared at me, searching for an answer that didn't exist. After a moment, he stood up and walked into the bedroom without another word. The next night, he tried a different tactic. "I feel like we're disconnected," he said after dinner, his tone softer, wounded, "like you're pulling away from me." "I'm not pulling away," I said. "I'm just being private." "But you're being cold." "I'm being consistent," I corrected gently. "You taught me the difference." That landed harder than I expected. His face fell, and for a split second, I saw something close to fear. The following day, the anger arrived. This is passive-aggressive, he snapped when I answered another question with another neutral response. You're doing this on purpose. I'm answering you, I said. These are perfectly reasonable answers. They'd be completely acceptable if I were talking about my past. That's different, he shot back again. I held his gaze. Then explain how. He couldn't. Instead, he stormed out of the room, leaving the question hanging between us like smoke. 2 days later, the phone call came. His mother. We'd always been cordial. Not close, but polite. I answered because ignoring it would have escalated things faster. My son says you've been distant, she began, skipping any pretense of small talk. He's very upset. I've been respecting his boundaries, I said calmly. I assumed they went both ways. There was a long pause on the line. Then her tone hardened. What are you talking about? He told me his past was off limits, I explained, so I made my present off limits too. That's incredibly immature, she snapped. He's your fiancé. He deserves to know what's going on in your life. And I'm his fiancé, I replied. Don't I deserve the same? His past isn't relevant to your future together, she said sharply. Then my present isn't relevant either. You're twisting this, she said. A man is entitled to privacy about his past relationships. That doesn't mean you get to shut him out and punish him like this. I felt something go very still inside me. So he gets privacy, I said slowly, and I get obligation. That's exactly what you're saying. She accused me of being petty, of punishing her son, of creating conflict right before the wedding. Then she hung up on me. When he came home that night, he was furious. You told my mother about our private issues, he said, voice raised. She called me, I replied. Was I supposed to lie? You made me look unreasonable. I let out a short, incredulous laugh. You are being unreasonable. You want full access to my life while I'm expected to accept silence from yours. That's not a partnership, that's control. His face crumpled. He cried, asked why I couldn't just let it go, why I couldn't just trust him. I trusted you for 3 years, I said quietly. Then you told me I wasn't allowed to ask questions about your own life. That night, he slept in the guest room. The next morning, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up. A text from a contact saved as "Do not answer." I didn't touch the phone. I didn't read the message. But I remembered it. And in that moment, the situation stopped being theoretical. Something real had just entered the room. After that morning, nothing felt neutral anymore. The apartment was the same couch, same kitchen, same muted hum of the refrigerator, but my body moved through it differently, like I was navigating a space that had quietly turned hostile. Every sound felt sharper, every silence felt deliberate. He avoided me for most of the day, claiming meetings, errands, anything that kept him out of reach. I didn't chase him. I didn't ask where he was going. I had already learned that questions were a privilege I no longer had. By evening, he tried to act normal. He asked what I wanted for dinner, asked if I'd watched the show we'd been saving. His voice was careful, almost gentle, like if he kept things light enough, the tension might dissolve on its own. It didn't. I could feel my chest tighten every time he spoke, my heart thudding too fast for the calm I was trying to project. I wasn't angry in the way people expect anger to look. I wasn't yelling or throwing accusations. I was something colder than that, alert, observant, quietly bracing. That night, he finally said what had been hanging between us all day. You're really serious about this, he said, sitting at the edge of the bed, about not sharing. I'm serious about consistency, I replied. I'm doing exactly what you asked me to do. That's not what I meant. I turned toward him. Then what did you mean? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration leaking through the cracks. I meant my past, not this. This is my life, I said. This is my present. You don't get to decide which parts of me are accessible and which aren't. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. You're acting like I'm hiding something terrible, he said. I'm not. Then why hide it at all? The question came out softer than I felt, almost tired. He didn't answer. That silence did more damage than any confession could have. Over the next few days, his emotions came in cycles. One moment he was defensive, insisting I was blowing things out of proportion. The next, he was wounded, accusing me of pulling away, of punishing him. Then he'd switch again, apologetic, almost pleading, promising that everything was fine if I could just stop this. Stop asking for balance. Stop asking for equality. Stop asking for reassurance that the person I was about to marry wasn't living a double life I wasn't allowed to see. Inside my head, the questions multiplied. Who was the woman in that photo? Why did he react with anger instead of discomfort? Why now, after 3 years of openness, did his past suddenly need to be sealed off? And most of all, Why did everyone around him seem so invested in making me feel unreasonable for wanting the same transparency I was expected to give? I replayed the call with his mother over and over, her certainty ringing in my ears, the way she'd said it so confidently, as if it were obvious that his privacy mattered more than my sense of safety in the relationship. That realization hurt more than I wanted to admit, because it meant this wasn't just about him. It was about a system that already expected me to bend. Late one night, lying awake beside him, I stared at the ceiling while he slept. His breathing was steady, untroubled. I wondered how long he'd been sleeping this easily while carrying something he couldn't, or wouldn't, share with me. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't imagining worst-case scenarios. I was listening to my instincts for the first time without trying to quiet them. Trust isn't just about believing someone won't hurt you. It's about believing they'll let you see them clearly enough to decide for yourself. And right now, he was asking me to marry a silhouette. That was when I knew this wasn't a phase or a misunderstanding. Something was coming. Something that would force the truth out into the open, whether he was ready or not. The pressure didn't ease, it multiplied. Once silence stopped working, once guilt and anger failed to pull me back into the role I was clearly expected to play, the situation escalated in a way that felt almost coordinated, like decisions were being made about me without me present. The first person to show up was his sister. She didn't knock. She never did. She walked straight in, keys jangling, eyes sharp, already braced for confrontation. "We need to talk," she said. I closed my laptop slowly and looked up at her. "Do we?" Her mouth tightened. "You're being ridiculous about this whole thing." "About respecting boundaries?" I asked calmly. "About punishing him," she snapped. "He has a right to his privacy." "I agree," I said, "and I have a right to mine." She waved a hand dismissively. "It's not the same. Repeating that doesn't make it true." Her frustration boiled over. She stamped her foot against the floor, the sound sharp and childish. "He's protecting himself. He's been hurt before. You're supposed to be safe for him." The word safe echoed in my head. "Safe means what?" I asked. "That he gets to hide parts of his life indefinitely while I stay completely open?" "That's not hiding," she insisted. "That's self-preservation." "And what about mine?" I asked quietly. "What about my right to know who I'm marrying?" She scoffed. "God, you're such a typical woman. Always making everything about you." My spine straightened. "This is literally about me," I said. "About whether I'm treated as an equal partner or someone who's expected to accept less honesty." She tried guilt next. "He's been crying every night," she said. "Is that what you want? To make him miserable?" "I want a mutual relationship," I replied. "I want to marry someone who believes I deserve the same respect he demands." That landed harder than she expected. Her face drained slightly. "You'd really call off the wedding over this?" she asked. "I'd call off the wedding over the principle behind it." She left without another word. When he came home later, his eyes were red, his voice strained. "My sister said you're thinking about canceling the wedding." "I'm thinking about whether I want to marry someone who sees me as less deserving of honesty than he is." "I'm not hiding anything bad," he said quickly. "Then why hide it at all?" Silence. Long, heavy, uncomfortable. "There are things in my past that are complicated," he finally said. "Things I'm not proud of." For the first time in weeks, hope flickered. "Then talk to me," I said softly. "I can't," he replied immediately. Something inside my chest collapsed, not dramatically, but decisively. "I can't marry you like this," I said. He stared at me. "What?" "Not with secrets. Not with rules that only apply to me." I reached for my keys. My hands were steady. "I'm going to stay somewhere else for a few days. We both need space." Panic flashed across his face. He grabbed my arm. "Please don't leave," he said. "I love you." I looked at him, the man I'd planned a future with, now asking me to commit without clarity. "I love you too," I said. "But love isn't enough when trust only goes one way." I gently removed his hand. "Figure out what matters more," I said. "Keeping your secrets, or keeping me." I stayed at my brother's place for 4 days. He listened quietly, then said what I'd been avoiding. "Either he's hiding something major," he said, "or he has serious control issues." "I know. So what's the plan?" "I wait," I said. "I see what he chooses." During those 4 days, my phone wouldn't stop. Calls from him, messages from his mother, his sister, friends accusing me of being cruel, of emotionally withdrawing. One even accused me of emotional abuse. That one actually made me laugh. On the 3rd day, something shifted. A friend who works at a bar downtown texted me. "Not trying to start drama, but your fiancé was here last night with a woman. Looked pretty intense. Just thought you should know." My stomach dropped. I asked him to describe her. Tall, dark hair, well-dressed. They were arguing most of the time, but then she started crying and he was holding her hand. I stared at the screen for a long time. On its own, it could have been innocent. But paired with the secrecy, the ultimatum, the contact labeled "Do Not Answer," the picture was sharpening. On the fourth day, he showed up at my brother's door. "Please come home," he said. "I'll explain everything." I crossed my arms. "I need you to understand something first." "What?" "I can't promise I won't leave until I know what I'm being asked to stay for." He swallowed hard. Then he took a deep breath. And for the first time, the vault began to open. He stood there in the doorway, shoulders tight, hands clenched like he was bracing for something he could already feel coming. "I need you to promise something first," he said quietly. "Promise you won't leave." I shook my head once, slow, certain. "I can't promise that until I know what you're asking me to accept." That was when the last bit of control drained from his face. No more bargaining, no more managing the narrative. "Okay," he said, "I'll tell you." We sat across from each other. The space between us felt enormous. "There's someone from my past," he began. "Someone I was involved with for a long time, longer than I ever told you." "How long?" I asked. 4 years, on and off." My heart didn't race, it went still. "And she was married," I said. "Yes. And she's the woman you met at the bar," I continued. "The one saved in your phone as "Do Not Answer." He nodded, jaw tight. "I kept the contact so I wouldn't answer, to remind myself." "A reminder you ignored," I said quietly, while we were already breaking. "She reached out first," he said. "She said she was getting divorced. She wanted closure." I let out a slow breath. "And you chose to give her that, while asking me to live in the dark." I didn't think— "No," I interrupted gently. "You didn't." Silence settled between us, heavy and final. "I need to know one more thing," I said, "and I need you to be honest." He nodded. "Have you been in contact with her since you and I got together?" The pause answered before his words did. "Just a few times," he admitted. "Nothing inappropriate, just catching up." 3 years. That was the moment something solidified inside me. Not anger, not grief, but clarity. I reached up and slid the ring off my finger. Slowly, deliberately. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of everything it had once represented. Then I placed it gently on the table between us. "I can't be engaged to you," I said. "Not like this." His face crumpled. "I made a mistake," he said, breaking. "I'll cut all contact. I'll delete her number. I'll do anything." He grabbed his phone, hands shaking, deleting the contact in front of me, like proof might still save him. "That's not the point anymore," I said softly. "Then what is?" he whispered. "The point is that you demanded transparency from me while deciding I wasn't entitled to yours. You didn't protect our relationship. You protected a secret." "I was afraid," he said. "I know," I replied, "but fear doesn't excuse imbalance." I stood. The conversation was over because the truth was finally complete. The next day, while he was at work, I returned to the apartment. I packed only what was mine, carefully, thoroughly. I didn't touch anything that wasn't. I wasn't being vindictive, I was being precise. I left the ring on the kitchen counter where we'd talked, exactly where it belonged. When I walked out, I didn't feel dramatic. I felt clear. That was the moment I stopped negotiating my worth. The days after I left were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, just stripped down. Like all the noise had finally burned itself out, leaving only the truth behind. I stayed with my brother, sleeping on a mattress that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old books. He didn't hover, he didn't push. He just checked in with a look now and then, like he was making sure I was still anchored to my body. My phone, on the other hand, had no such restraint. Texts, missed calls, voicemails stacking on top of each other like waves. At first they were frantic. "Please talk to me. I can explain. I made a mistake." Then they shifted. Hurt, accusatory, defensive, as if my refusal to come back immediately was proof that I'd been the unreasonable one all along. I didn't respond. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't negotiating. I wasn't explaining myself. I wasn't softening my edges to make someone else more comfortable. I was just still. On the third night, a message came through that felt different. Not louder, quieter, more careful. "I know I don't get to ask for anything, but I need you to know I've blocked her. I've told my family to stay out of it. I'll do whatever you need. Just tell me what that is." I read it twice. Then I put my phone face down. Because that message, for all its apparent humility, still missed the point. He was asking me to give him a checklist, a set of tasks he could complete to earn his way back to stability without ever addressing the imbalance that had created the rupture in the first place. Transparency offered after exposure isn't a gift, it's damage control. The turning point didn't arrive with a dramatic confrontation or a sudden revelation. It arrived quietly, in the absence of urgency. in the space where I realized I wasn't afraid of losing him anymore. I was afraid of losing myself. The next morning, I went back to the apartment while he was at work. Not to reconcile, not to fight, just to finish what I'd started. The place felt untouched, like it was waiting for me to come back and restore the narrative he preferred. His jacket was still draped over the chair, his mug still in the sink. Our life paused mid-sentence. I moved through the rooms calmly, packing the last of what was mine. Books, personal documents, a framed photo I hadn't had the heart to take before. I didn't rush, I didn't linger. On the kitchen counter, the ring was still there, exactly where I'd left it. Seeing it again didn't hurt the way I thought it might. It just looked small. A symbol that had once carried promises too fragile to survive daylight. I left it untouched. Before I walked out, I wrote a note, not long, not emotional. I didn't leave because of your past. I left because you decided I wasn't entitled to the truth. I won't build a marriage where honesty is conditional. I placed it beside the ring and closed the door behind me. Later that evening, he called. I answered, not because I felt pulled back, but because I was finally steady enough to hear him without bending. I've told everyone to back off, he said. My mom, my sister, I know they crossed lines. They didn't cross them alone, I replied. They crossed them because you let them. He was quiet. I know, he said eventually. I didn't protect you. No, I said. You protected yourself at my expense. He asked if there was any chance, any version of this, where we could rebuild. I didn't answer immediately, because this was the moment, the real one. I don't want a relationship where honesty only shows up when it's convenient, I said finally. I don't want to be managed, or controlled, or kept in the dark so someone else can feel safe. So that's it, he said. Yes, I replied. That's it. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart steady, breath even, and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Relief. Not because it was over, but because I had chosen myself without apology. That was the turning point. Not when the truth came out, but when I stopped asking someone else to meet me where I was already standing. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It spread slowly, then everywhere, like damage you don't notice at first because it's happening behind closed doors, in group chats you're not in conversations where your name is spoken like a cautionary tale. The first wave came from his family. His mother called repeatedly. I didn't answer. When I didn't, the voicemails started piling up, tight, emotional, accusatory. She said I'd humiliated her son, that I'd overreacted, that I'd thrown away a future over something that had nothing to do with me. I deleted every message without replying. His sister was less controlled. She sent paragraphs accusing me of being manipulative, dramatic, cold. She said I'd played games instead of just trusting him. She warned me I'd regret this when I realized no relationship came without flaws. What struck me wasn't the anger. It was the assumption that my role had been to absorb the discomfort quietly, that choosing myself was somehow an act of aggression. Friends followed, mostly people closer to him than to me, messages wrapped in concern but edged with judgment. You could have handled it better. Everyone has a past. Walking away feels extreme. I responded to exactly two. To one, I said, transparency isn't baggage. To the other, boundaries aren't punishment. Then I stopped engaging. He tried once more. This time it was a long email. Calm, structured, full of reflection. He admitted he'd been afraid, that he'd handled things badly, that he understood now why I felt shut out. But woven through every paragraph was the same unspoken expectation, that understanding should naturally lead to reconciliation. I read it twice, then I closed it. Accountability that still expects access isn't accountability, it's negotiation. A week later, the practical consequences surfaced. The apartment lease was in both our names. I could have fought it, made it messy, let resentment drag things out. Instead, I paid the early termination fee, took the credit hit, and moved on. A clean break costs more upfront, but it saves you in the long run. Then came the wedding fallout, the venue deposit, the photographer, thousands gone. His family demanded reimbursement, framing it as shared responsibility. I consulted a lawyer just to be safe. You're not married, he said simply. There's no legal obligation. You don't owe them anything. So I didn't pay. That decision triggered another wave, long letters, emotional appeals. His mother wrote 4 pages about how I'd ruined her son's life, embarrassed the family, destroyed years of planning. I kept the letter, not because it mattered, but because documentation has a way of grounding people who confuse emotion with leverage. Meanwhile, the truth started circulating on its own. Mutual friends asked questions. Not confrontational ones, quiet ones. When they did, I told them exactly what happened. No embellishment, no emotional framing, just facts. The reactions were telling. Pauses, soft exhalations, a few apologies. I stopped being the villain in whispered conversations. Around that time, something unexpected happened. A man I didn't know reached out to me. He introduced himself carefully, explaining that he was the ex-husband of the married woman my fiancé had been involved with years ago. He wasn't angry. He wasn't confrontational. His message was measured, almost clinical. He said he'd found old messages during the divorce, conversations where my fiancé had been mentioned, and he wanted to understand how far back everything really went. Apparently, during the last years of his marriage, there had been constant tension. Late nights, vague explanations. His wife insisting there was nothing going on, while guarding her phone like it contained explosives. My fiancé's name had come up more than once, always framed as just a friend, someone from her past who didn't matter anymore. We talked for nearly an hour. He told me about the slow unraveling of his marriage, the gut feeling that something was wrong long before he had proof, about hiring a private investigator during the divorce, not out of revenge, but out of desperation for clarity. The PI had confirmed the affair. Hotels, gifts, charges on their joint credit card. Listening to him didn't shock me. It clarified everything. This wasn't a secret that had accidentally survived into my relationship. It was a pattern that had already destroyed one marriage before it ever reached mine. Before we ended the call, I asked one final question. Are they together now? He let out a short, bitter laugh. For a while. Once the divorce started, they moved fast. She thought she'd finally won. Then his voice flattened. Didn't last. Turns out a man who cheats with you doesn't suddenly become faithful just because the situation changes. We hung up politely. No bonding, no shared grief, just confirmation. Some people don't make one bad choice. They repeat it. And watching the consequences ripple outward, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not relief. Just distance. And distance, I was learning, can be its own kind of peace. 6 months later, my life didn't look dramatic. It looked quieter. The kind of quiet that doesn't beg to be filled. I moved into a smaller place on my own. Nothing fancy, light through the windows in the morning, space that belonged entirely to me. The first night there, I sat on the floor with takeout containers and realized something unexpected. I could breathe all the way down into my chest again. That surprised me. I wasn't over it. Not completely. Trust doesn't reset just because you made the right decision. I still caught myself second-guessing people's words, pausing a beat longer than necessary, listening for what wasn't being said. But there was clarity now. I knew exactly what I was listening for. I heard through mutual friends that he'd moved back in with his parents, that the wedding was officially canceled, that the narrative around me had softened as the truth became harder to ignore. Nothing dramatic, no public reckoning, just a slow, quiet shift as people connected dots they'd previously avoided. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to anymore. The last time my brother asked if I regretted how I handled it, the matching his energy, the withdrawal, the refusal to negotiate, I answered without hesitation. No, because it worked, not as a punishment, as a mirror. If I had accepted his boundary without question, we would have gotten married. I would have found out the truth eventually. After the wedding, after mortgages, maybe after children. I would have built a life on a foundation that had already cracked. He gave me the exit early. I was just stubborn enough to take it. I don't think all boundaries are red flags. Some are healthy. Some protect healing. Not everything needs to be shared all at once. But when someone demands access to your life while refusing to grant the same, that isn't a boundary. It's a wall, and walls don't belong in partnerships. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Intimacy isn't about perfection. It's about willingness. Willingness to be seen, to be known, to trust someone with the unpolished parts, not just the version that photographs well. Trust your instincts when they whisper. Pay attention when energy doesn't match words. And don't be afraid to walk away from anyone who believes they deserve more of you than they're willing to give back. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't staying. It's leaving with your self-respect intact. That was the real ending. Not heartbreak. Freedom.